Right. Y'all hear that?
Yeah.
Skimzy, the producer. Purchase your tracks today. 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 Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Yeah, let's jump in. Good morning, Tia.
Good morning, Amber. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm really so excited for this. It's giving like recreation, latchkey, Saturday morning cartoons
Absolutely.
vibes. Um, I was gonna give us more time to start, but I'm like, why not set it up and go through the process now? You're exactly right.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it. We got almost 10
Okay,
people on the live stream, so they ready, we're ready.
period. I know that's right. So let's start by the process for today and then give some background to the Mako study hall. That's what I was thinking. And then we're going to jump in to our first talk at 9:15. This is also, we're doing some dual communication right now where I'm speaking to the participants as well as those folks of you all who have woken up to join us on YouTube right now. Tell your friends, share the link.
Share the link.
Um, so the way the process is going to work for the participants, this is just a heads up that I will announce who's going and then I will say who's on deck so that you can prepare your mind, body, and spirit to begin. Also, for those of you all who are watching this live, and for those of you all who will watch it later as a part of our archive of creativity and culture criticism, and the processes that lead to writing, right? A lot of times when we think about writing and thought production, we only deal with the product, the finished product, but the motivation behind this is to really honor everything, all the living and poking around and thinking you have to do to even get to a new idea, to encourage people to go through that process to get to new ideas. Um, yeah, so that will be our flow. For all of you all watching, I forgot this part. For all of you all watching, please feel free to use the chat to talk back to each other because one of the things that we have learned through this process is that while it is self-guided and self-motivating, um, it is a way for us to connect with each other in ways that I just there was a hunch there. We did it, and it's true. You do connect with people through learning together, which we all know. Tia, would you like to start by adding any thoughts or just give me some comment as we go into this space today?
Yeah, absolutely. Amber, first of all, thank you for inviting me on this journey with you. I love being able to create spaces for Black folks to think and to share. Um, One of our pioneers that we lifted up was Dream Hampton, and she said to me one time, anytime you bring Black people into a space, it transforms it. And the way that these 30 some participants have transformed space on a Saturday morning via Zoom has been absolutely inspiring and life-changing. Like you said, you followed a hunch, but it's more than a hunch. I feel like it's inspired. I feel like it's ancestral. I feel like the
Mm,
times that we're in right now call for us to gather in as many ways and places and spaces as possible. And yes, it was a virtual space, but it felt very tangible. And I felt the call every Saturday morning, and it felt like, almost being in a gym or, like a workout group, that same type of like level of accountability, and like iron sharpening iron type of, being rigorous with one another, and holding each other to this commitment to ourselves. There was just something so really unique about it and really compelling about being able to come together to study, and study not just for the sake of studying, but studying Black texts, studying for the sake of knowledge production, studying for the sake of we are cultural producers, we're critics, we're going to, take the time that we are pouring into ourselves to transform other spaces and places as well. And so I just wanted to reflect that back to all of the Mako peppers on the vine. And I want to reflect that back to ourselves that it is a worthwhile endeavor to come together and hold
mm,
space. Absolutely.
mhm. Yeah, and that became realized very quickly each time we gathered, whether it, for me, there would be nights I didn't go to sleep till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but I was still waking up to come to this space knowing that I didn't have to come perfect. I just had to come,
Mm-hmm.
and that the rest would follow from there. I want to give a little more background to Mako Study Hall and the structure. And this is something we'll look to do more in the future. Following this talk, we will share our syllabus that was collectively sourced and created by all the voices that you will hear today. The Mako Study Hall was a weekly self-guided study group for culture critics and creative nonfiction writers, co-facilitated by myself and Tia. And even folks who did not consider themselves writers came into this space, which was very important to me because I knew that to study will inspire the knowledge creation. So I brought this idea to Tia because of our work through the USC Annenberg Innovation Lab. And she eager, like just was immediate yes to being a co-facilitator to this space, really honoring the fact that we cannot continue to do very important cultural organizing work alone. We do not have to be single leaders in this space at all. And together we invited culture critics, these creative nonfiction writers, just these people with a deep love for community learning, to get on a Zoom every Saturday, do check-ins and check-outs, and we went on mute and we studied. And some of us made it all the way through our book. Some of us stayed in the introduction, but the work still was done. The syllabus that will be released after this is a documentation of that initial seed planning, of that initial work. Um, Also, I want to give a little bit of background of my creative structure that inspired this work, which is a microcosm, a creative imagination called Ample World, which right now is operating as a visionary cultural ecosystem that I built to really center and call in Black lesbian creativity, not just as a presence, but as a foundational force that works to preserve as well as move forward Black culture. By rewriting the narrative that Black lesbians are not critical to shaping uh, culture, we build a practice that reclaims our place as both creators and guardians of Black cultural memory. And that it's okay to center in something as specific as Black lesbian identity, because Black lesbians have done a lot of work that goes unnoticed in Black popular culture and Black historical spaces. So I will acknowledge that that is the seed. That was a starting point that also made space for so much more. Um, yeah, so that is what I have. Also, I really encourage you all that today you are going to hear 5 minute snippets of 6 weeks of work. We're already in the 6 weeks of work. We only chose one text to really honor the labor that goes into learning and presenting Black studies, queer studies, all these different things, right? That this is about seed planting, not about coming to and process, not about just completing projects, which often a lot of us are forced into in order to have our work funded and to have our work seen. But this is honoring, like, yeah, it does take time to do all this work and it does take a commitment to time. So you will hear 5 minutes from each person. And if you're like, oh my goodness, I want to hear more, of course you do. Follow those people, look them up, figure out what book they read, grab that book, and really start to build your own creative network, your own cultural network that is inspired by the voices you will hear today. Some of these folks I met for the first time on the Zoom, others I have known for years. And it has just made my life that much more abundant, and I'm sure has contributed to each other as well. Um, yeah, the last thing I will say is this will all be presented in the syllabus again. We have threatened to make this a filibuster, but we're going to really try not to, okay? But who knows? It already is very robust in its, or yeah, it's very robust in our eagerness to even present this, to make this possible. So each person will have 5 minutes. This, again, is just a snippet of what they were doing. I will also turning my direction away from the audience back to the participants. Anything you present today is whole and perfect. Um, it is, again, as we have said many times, just the beginning to honor the work that we have done today. And I'm excited for you all to share that with each other mostly, and to not only present my own work, but to learn from you all, because what I know is that the work that each of us explore ranges from Black feminist thought and theory to disability and bodily autonomy, queer and trans cultural production, archives, hospitality, space making, art, music, digital culture, resistance, liberation, all of it, ecology, land, environmental memory. Um, yeah, it's all there because we put out this call for people to come with what inspired them and the Black literary classics. So that's where I will stop, and I will now transition into our presentation. I have decided to go first to just warm up the space. Next up, we have Anjoli, or on deck, we have Anjoli doing their presentation, but I will be starting with the sonic imagination of sapphic undertones. Okay, this is where teaching begins. Okay, so my work in April, I was at a party, and it was a party called the House of Zanzibar, where my girlfriend, as well as someone who I've done some creative work with, um, threw a party at Homage Brewing here in LA. It also coincided with the week of my grandmother's birthday, who have since transitioned. That week as well, Justin Fairfax had murdered Dr. Sienna Weisner, his wife, in front of their two children. Shamar Elkins had shot and killed 8 children. 7 of those children were his own, and one was a nephew. And I was there in the space to play an all vinyl set, DJ set, um, collected vinyl works that were collected along the lines of disco, R&B, and soul music. Essentially, I started curating my vinyl to be played in public because I have it, and I think vinyl is meant to be played out loud. Music is meant to be shared. Um, and after my set, which featured all female vocalists, because I was I didn't have the words for what I was experiencing in terms of grief regarding um, the murder of these Black women, these Black mothers, and even the passing, and coinciding with the birthday of my grandmother, who had passed away, who had dealt with some institutional medical violence, I believed, in her transition. And while I was at that club party, I took a break outside, as one does, to share a joint with friends. Specifically, it was one of my friends, Kennedy Arnett, who is a friend and anthropologist in her own right. And I just started crying after she asked me how I was doing. And I think about that moment in regards to this, what I study, because as a cultural worker, a sentiment that I hear often from funders is that they don't fund parties and party spaces. And I began to study liner notes for the revolution, the intellectual life of Black feminist sound by Daphne A. Brooks during our 6 week time together. Um, and one of the most useful things I believe studying and reading critical work gives me is new language to better understand what I am already living through and experiencing. And in studying this work, I realized not only does hearing people say they don't fund parties piss me off in general, but I learned why it continues to piss me off, as someone whose most prominent offerings right now are spaces of joy, fun, partying, and gathering, from comedy events to this music experience that I have been invited into, and in turn, organizing the Mako study hall. So the reason why I get frustrated with my colleagues in the field of cultural organizing proclaiming that they rather fund discussion about fun and culture, but aren't funding the fun and the party itself is because, as someone who writes jokes, jokes are best when you don't have to explain them. That the work is best when we don't have to explain it, but get to live inside of the work. Um, Through this study, I learned about sonic cultures and sonic imagination. In the reading, there was a quote that I would like to pull that through music, Black women create electrifying networks for Black women and more to move through and use as a means of self making, self reinvention, and co relational urgency. The party and sonic cultures are also the space where we create the new language that we need and give it embodied music. Through the work that I read during these 6 weeks, I also learned very powerful terms like Black feminist artist intellectual. And this text affirmed me in my desire to commit to the continued work of doing the intellectual labor for Black women creatives in the cultures that we make around our gathering and our creativity, be it creating and contextualizing new genders, which I have seriously thought about working with new terms that go beyond hip hop and R&B as it continues to push Black women out because its origins did not consider us, to thinking of new genres like the Black Femtastic or Vanity Blues, which I think of the Black Femtastic as music made by Black women for other Black women. Vanity blues being the type of music that we play simply for ourselves. But I've decided to go in the direction of honoring what has now become my sonic curation name, which is Sapphic Undertones, which is work that has a hint of queerness, a hint of queerness specifically in how the music is made, as well as what the music is about.
Time.
And I'm at my time. Okay, so now we will continue. We're gonna do well today, right, Tia?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much. Again, my name is, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Amber J. Phillips, also known as Amber Abundance, and secretly known as Sapphic Undertones.
Okay. Hey y'all, it's my turn now. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Tia, as well. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Let's hop into this. Boom. Okay. Okay, we're in. All right. I'm gonna move because I have 5 minutes. I'm Angelique Charlot, she, her pronouns. Um, Quick shout outs. I'm in Baltimore right now for my brother's graduation. Shout out to my brother for graduating college. I love you. Shout out to my parents who are with me in the room and watching. And shout out to all the women who raised me, focusing on women because I'm reading Girl of Purple. And this book has meant a lot to so many of us intergenerationally. It's a book that I share with my mom as one of our favorites. So shout out to them, everyone who's in the room with me physically and spiritually. Um, uh, okay, let's get into it. Let's just hop in. Okay, so my presentation, as you saw on the first slide, The Color Purple and the Divinity of Desire, you're going to get a snippet of what I explored, and I'll give some ways to engage further later. But desire is at the center of this book for me, and here's a couple reasons why, but I'll focus on the second one from the left. Um, that in this book and in our lives, I think many of us have seen that desire is a uniquely human emotion, and that in our world order, not everyone is human. And you see that in this book, desire is meant to belong to men, and the desires of men are meant to give the world order. And in this way, men are affirming their humanity, and I don't mean humanity in like the goodness of human, but humanity as the quality of being human. They affirm their humanity by exercising their desires over others. And so in this way, desire becomes a precursor to domination. I want something, perhaps it's a woman, perhaps it's land, and my desire for it gives me the right to take it over, regardless of its implications for others and even for myself. Oops. Okay. So in this model of desire, we see that desire, it becomes, or sorry, I'll go back real quick. In this model of desire, we see that Celie comes to learn that her sexuality is synonymous with violence, particularly violence from men, right? In her relationship with Pa, and in her relationship with Mr., we see that sex and violence become one and the same. And because they want Celie to believe that she is deserving of that kind of violence, she has to believe things about herself, namely that she is ugly, that she is undesirable. And this is not just a personal belief of hers, this is a systemic belief. And I'm borrowing from Vanessa Rochelle Lewis' book, Reclaiming Ugly, in which she says that ugly is not just a trait, but it's a social, moral, and structural position, right? It's not just about whether I'm cute or not, but my beauty, particularly as a woman, gives me the right to exercise my autonomy. It might give me access to financial gains, right? There's a lot there around beauty. And Celie has internalized this belief around her ugliness deeply, so much so that she dehumanizes herself. We hear her talk about herself as wood, and we hear her talk about dehumanizing herself, making herself wood as a means to survival, right? Because she is not beautiful enough to push back against the violence that men have exercised against her. In contrast, Suge is meant to be seen as a beautiful figure. We see Mr.'s desire for Suge and Celie's desire for Suge. But we also see that Suge is uglified, right? Again, borrowing from Rochelle Lewis, or from Vanessa Rochelle Lewis. Um, and this uglification, right, which is the making of someone as ugly in a structural way, comes from Suge's blackness, the nappiness of her hair, the fact that she doesn't raise her children, the fact that she has autonomy sexually and exercises it openly. All of these things unmake her as a woman and delineate her from the category of a good woman, right, a desirable woman, even though she is seen as beautiful. So we see this distinction, right, that ugliness, capital U ugliness, is not just about your physical appearance, but your adherence to social law. Okay. In desiring Celie, or in desiring Suge, Celie then undoes these logics, right, that tell her that Suge should not be available for desire, and particularly to her. In doing that, I think we see queerness as a very unique opportunity because those same logics apply to Celie. And in the way that she sees Suge as beautiful and desirable, she then must also come to see herself, right? And Suge participates in this process because she directs Celie back to herself spiritually in a way that she asserts that Celie has autonomy, that Celie should pursue business opportunities later in the book, right? But also, in their sexual relationship in particular, Suge literally directs Celie back to her own vagina and clitoris, right? And this is a very important part of the book, which is also lost in the movie and in the musical, I think in part because of its like revolutionary power, right? That their relationship is not just about love or affinity for each other, but it's about sexual reclamation and desire, right? And that pleasure, the pleasure that they experience from each other, is a humanizing force which refutes the belief that they cannot assert themselves, that they're only available to men, that their bodies are made to be objects and not to be human, right? Um, and so I
Hi.
think that, okay, great. Well, that's what I got. I'll skip to the end just so you can see. This is my Substack. This is a peek at what I have, and I'm gonna fully like write out my thoughts here. And so there'll be a fuller essay coming out about what I thought and my Instagram too. Thanks again, Tia. Thanks, Amber. Thanks to my co-participants. I really enjoyed being with y'all.
Thank you.
Reginald, you're on deck. You ready?
Yep. Hey everyone, Reginald McKinley. I am exploring the Chronicles of Ori by Harmonia Rosales. And so excited to be here. Thank you. One of the biggest revelations I've had recently is that the route to liberation is actually internal work. It's not just intellectually, it's not just politically, it's not just, but it's actually somatically. It's physical, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. The nervous system is the thing we have to focus on. And while reading the Chronicles of Ori, I realized the book is actually wrestling with the same idea through mythology. The central tension in the book is that there is no good versus evil, but it's a fragmentation versus remembrance. That's that's the whole hook of the book. There's a moment in the book where flood splits Orun and Aye. That is the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And what struck me is that the flood isn't framed as punishment. It is framed as separation. Fragmentation, disconnection are not punishment. And honestly, I think many of us are living in a fragmented states all the time. We have fragmented attention, we have fragmented nervous systems, we have fragmented identities, we have fragmented relationships to our own bodies. We have fragmented relationships mainly to rest. We have fragmented relationships to our own intuition. And I started realizing that liberation may actually require reintegration before anything else. I think sometimes we imagine liberation as primarily external, like institutions changing or systems changing or structures changing. And those things matter deeply. They do. But I've started wondering what happens if someone gains external freedom while remaining internally dysregulated? If your nervous system is still operating from fear, if your body is still operating from survival, if your mind is still fragmented, then even freedom can become difficult to recognize. So I believe what I've been realizing is that the internal work creates clarity, and clarity creates discernment, and discernment changes every decision after it. The clearer your internal lens becomes, the more accurately you navigate the world. That's why the idea of Ori in the book affected me so deeply. Ori isn't just about destiny, it's a sacred alignment. It's consciousness before distortion, before fragmentation, before fear, before noise, and before separation. And I think a lot of modern life keeps people separated from themselves, distracted from themselves, disconnected from their own internal knowing. So now I'm becoming more and more interested in practices that restore coherence. Silence, breath work, rest, somatic work, sound, regulation, deep study like this, reflection. This is how I understand what the Chronicles of Ori is about. It ultimately left me thinking about this one topic. Maybe the deepest form of liberation is remembering yourself clearly enough to move through the world without abandoning yourself anymore. And maybe internal work isn't separated from liberation work. Maybe it's the foundation of it. Because the clearer we become internally, the clearer future becomes externally. I would like to thank Tia and Amber for putting together such a beautiful space. I would like to thank y'all for coming every week. I personally had an interesting journey where I walked out of my 30s in this study hall, and I'm a month into my 40s at this teaching, and I don't take
That's time.
And so thank you all.
That was wonderful. Okay. I gotta build my confidence around time, but that was smooth. Okay.
Hey, everybody. My name is Kiana Harris, and I am reading Alice Walker's The Color Purple as well, but reading it as Bible Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. So I chose to sit with this book as a close read for Study Hall as I work on my second book. All of my work and my next work is really all about women unbecoming and reinvention. So my upcoming work deals with my own healing journey and curating artifacts of my family legacy and realizing that some things are precious and need preservations, but others are designed to be temporary and better left in the past. So the color purple for me has always been a guide to freedom, a how-to guide in breaking the chains of patriarchy, religion, sexuality, and self-repression. So I haven't did a close read of the whole book yet because I'm doing a super close read and I'm a slow reader. But while reading it, it made me think about Genesis, Exodus, and Revelations. The genesis of trauma across time and family lines that we unwillingly inherit, the exodus of learning how to leave it all behind, and the many revelations of what can happen when you choose yourself instead of waiting on somebody to choose you. In the Genesis, for me, the color purple reminds us that we all come here born into the bullshit, shit that does not belong to us, shit that was left passed down to us. And we're forced to carry these relics of trauma and pain and told that these are hard earned and need to be carried with us at all times. So in a personal way, I see the color purple as a Adam and Eve story, a retelling of the original sin of abusing, betraying, and abandoning Black women by their own families, and how we too can become a conspirator in passing down the same harm across generations. Celie was told so little about her own body and sexuality that her family is able to distort and disguise abuse, rape, and sex. And it follows a pattern of this miseducation that becomes purposeful. So you're not taught about yourself, but you're taught that children are blessings from God or from the stork. So the miseducation of and about Black women is the genesis of our problems. But the color purple is a guide to freedom and self-discovery. So because there is a genesis, there's also an exodus in looking at something different. Shug shows us the path to freedom. She's a free woman. She runs a very strict program. She was poly before we even knew what that word meant. Bisexual, always living in the present, moment to moment. She goes where she is loved and adored. And she's a woman who chooses herself and follows her dreams. So if she want to sing, she's going to sing. She's not held down by her children. What she's actually doing to me is more powerful, and she's modeling freedom for them. So they would hopefully do it in the same way in their lives as they got older. But we're not used to seeing that in women. So those women get get labeled hard to deal with, never satisfied, or just, the plain lazy bitches and hoes. Suge was basically the Beyonce of her day. And although some things have changed in current times, there's not enough because we continue to have these conversations around like Rihanna, Beyonce, Cardi, the whole thing. In interest of time, I'm going to leave you with a couple of other revelations. First being abusers treat Black women in our bodies, especially as disposable. At first, the body is almost like a playground, but even abusers can recognize how horrible they are. So it becomes disgust and repulsion because they really don't like themselves. And that turns into men bonding over stories of disgust and hatred of Black women. For example, all the male podcast culture that we see online, and how men exchange women as property to seal the bonds of patriarchy. They give each other permission to treat Black women badly and give each other permission to be monsters. Finally, there's a line that always comes to mind that is really I think about all the time, is when Celie says, "Heaven lasts always." And for me, this is not necessarily a commentary on religion or people's belief systems, but what really gets to me is that suffering and hardship is so bad here on this earthly plane for Black women. The promise of heaven becomes so tantalizing that we actually pray to die, not necessarily out loud or willing it, but the world is so much that we're looking forward to the after, the unknown, and nobody should be living like that. And that's all I got. And thank you y'all for this time. And thank you for joining me for Bible study. Thank you to Amber and Tia for providing such an amazing space. And I love it here. And that's it.
Perfect on time. Thank you so much.
All right, I believe I am next. Hey y'all, this is Ray, aka Raven Amonza Blake. And my topic for today is the spiritual technology of flying Africans. And and I was specifically focusing on the flight of the section in populated air flying Africans technology in the future, which is a chapter in the Black Fantastic by Eko Eshu. So I also, as I was reading this, I was also really drawn to another project that I'm working on. So let me just get into it. So as I research the history of film across the African diaspora, for my cinematic sommelier series, The Past, Present, and Future of Black Film, um, I become more enamored with the journey from its buried origins, such as creations becoming its buried origins to such creations becoming recognized as the most decorated and impactful films of present day. I have also come to attribute the more recent success of Black cinema to the spiritual technology of flying Africans. So a little bit about the history of flying Africans. Folklore from the 1700s and 1800s about captive Africans with the ability to fly spans across the entire African diaspora. What and accounts on these stories even exist in the U.S. government recordings, such as the Georgia Writers Project, which from 1939 to 1940 sent out of work workers to locations across the South, collecting narratives from formerly enslaved people. And regardless of the physical capability of flying, African people across the diaspora over time have begun to understand it as a significant way um, to take control of our bodies and imaginations, and actively remember and create cultural elements of the past, to maintain some control over the range of our psychic mobility. Even in his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, Douglass refers to flight as an epistemology through which to live. And in a recent seminar called Unnamed Conversation at the Edge of Sense at the Schumacher Center for New Economics, philosopher, writer, and activist and professor of psychology, Bio Okomolafe, describes fugitivity not as running away, but for the body being incapable of being held. On the imaginative flights back to Africa described in Mythic Returns, a section within that chapter, Trinidadian Canadian poet Dion Brand explains that one may not call these ways practical, but then certainly they certainly suggest a mastery of wayfinding, so much that no known map is necessary, nor any known of conveyance except escaping the body. And this poses the idea of return as being a liberating philosophy, which highlights efforts to reclaim African homeland and diasporic cultures as a feature within the diasporic experiences, which I think we're also seeing a lot within present day Black cinema. And Black artistic flights and as technology is another section within the chapter. And it mentions Amiri Baraka's essay, Technology and Ethos, where he explains that unlike the technology of the West, Black technology must be spiritually oriented because it must aspire to raise man's spirituality and expand man's consciousness. And this section, it states that for Baraka, Black art should not imitate that of the West. Indeed, as a speculative technology, Black art must liberate free lives, articulating the truth and make space for difference. And in Ritual, Power of Healing and Community by Malidoma Pritchett-Somé, he writes that to think about changing society is to evade the task we have towards helping ourselves as a people. It is more realistic to think about the spiritual needs of family and self as a starting point for social transformation than to begin, we can change Hollywood.
That's time.
Okay. Well, if y'all want to hear more about that, you can go to my Substack at cinematicsommelier.substack.com and Cinematic Sommelier on IG, Facebook, and Threads. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, Amber and Tia, and all y'all.
That's wonderful. Just so you all know that we also have our own chat and it's going up in here with support and so much love. Okay, next we have Tia. You're muted.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tia Oso. I am a organizer and a strategist, and I am going to talk about why making worlds is worth it. And so the text that I studied was actually a lecture by Aisha Shillingford of Intelligent Mischief, and it's called Audacious Visioning to Shape the Future. And so the first thing that I wanted to say is to give everybody just a couple of seconds to think about the term world building and what comes to mind for you when I say the term world building. World building is a literary frame device that's used by to help create the context or system of reality for their storytelling. So think about your favorite series or your favorite book. There's a whole world that has been built in order to have the characters live out their lives. This is also used in making movies and film and television. It is a concept that is used to help create the frameworks for what is going to happen and how things are going to play out in the storytelling. The reason why world building is so interesting to me and why it's such a necessary framework is that it can help us to understand both the times that we're in, but also to help create transformative movements that can help shape the future. World building is a tool for visioning and creating outside of the kind of usual strategic frameworks. You know, for those of you who have been in organizing spaces, you get the whiteboard out. First, you lay out what the problem is and who the, bad actors are, and then who has the power to make decisions. It's very much framed on being responsive or reactive, right? And not necessarily in the creative energy. But using world building, we can create the world right now that we wish to live into in the future. And it helps us create a more complete vision. When you're doing world building, you're thinking about both like the history, but also what the natural built environment is. You're thinking about ecology, you're thinking about culture, you're thinking about myths and ideas that are driving and shaping that world, laws also that are framing how that world is taking place. And why I wanted to study this is because we're living in somebody else's imagination right now. And living in the imagination, a white supremacist imagination, is exhausting. We're, on edge every day, seeing what fresh hell is going to come from these imaginations of white supremacists and capitalists that are seeking to create more extractive structures, seeking ways to wreak havoc, seeking ways to hold on to their power that they see slipping away from them as demographic shifts happens across the world. But one of the quotes that Aisha said in her lecture that really stuck with me is that we have the right and the responsibility to imagine. We're in a battle for imagination right now, and we deserve the space and the time to cultivate vision and imagination, to stay in our deep intuition, as Reggie was saying earlier in his talk, to tap into our ecology, tap into our physiology. And also the benefit of world building and imagination is that we have the opportunity to create what we want, not just to resist what we don't want. The next question that I have for you to reflect on is what are the core values that frame and govern your ideal imagined world? How does that look different than the world that we're living in now? If you were writing your own story, when you're writing your own narrative, right? What are the core values that are driving society? How do people relate to each other? What is our relationship to land? What is our relationship to water? What is our relationship to food? What is our relationship to one another? What is our relationship to time? When we get to ask ourselves these big questions, right? I believe that we create the pathways that will bring us from where we are now to where we want to be in the future. Another text that I related to the lecture that I studied is a book about Octavia Butler and her ephemera and her everyday and her notes and her notebooks and her going to the bus, and getting her a ride to the library and all of these different things. And she was constantly visioning and imagining and writing affirmations about what it is that she was going to accomplish, even when it was far off. She was writing down, oh, I'm going to be a best-selling author. I'm going to be a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm going to write this. I'm
That's
going to
time.
be successful. And so it's important for us to remember that we have to make our own worlds and we have to write ourselves in, as Octavia Butler told us. Again, my name's Tia Oso. I'm challenging all of us to use our imaginations and to boldly vision and audaciously imagine the world that we want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia. Okay, next we have next we have a note that I'm reading, a presentation that I'm reading in because Ivana lost their voice. So here we go. I have no voice this morning, unfortunately. Cannot join live, but I'm my notes, I'm pasting my notes and what I want to say. Hey y'all, my name is Ivana Esther Martinez, and I've been studying Tembe Deaton's Hearst Fresh Sets contemporary nail art from around the world, alongside supplementary studies from Tressie McMillan Cottom's Stick and other essays, plus Arabelle Hardy's The House of Beauty Lessons from the Image Industry. I'm an esthetician by trade, a humanities PhD dropout by plot twist, and a proud Black lesbian because God is good. At the intersection of these three experiences, I think often about how we do and do not adorn our bodies as a way to express belonging, lineage, and desire for connection. During the Mako study hall specifically, I've been using these texts to form my own methodology to jumpstart a broader archival project into the visual history of Black Sapphic beauty trades throughout the ages. I'm hoping to develop a monogram work titled Codes of Desire, celebrating a century of Black lesbian aesthetics, 1920s, 2020s, and I am looking to develop a book chapter specifically to nail trends in our community. At the end of Fresh Sets, in the author's credit, Deaton Hurst thanks her wife for matching sets with me every time. And reading that felt like a glimmer that I'm on to something. Thank you so much. Okay, next we have B. Wilson.
Okay, I'm going to take a second and pull up my slides. So I read Audre Lorde's, good morning, everybody. I read Audre Lorde's Cancer Journals, and I want to talk about Mullings on Mortality. So it's all ordered here. Let me just follow my slides. So I'm B. Wilson. My pronouns are they, them. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I live with sickle cell hemoglobin SC. I'm an advocate in the sickle cell space for queer and trans people and for sickle cell warriors in the queer and trans space. If you take a screenshot of this, this is where you can find me. I I'm on Instagram and Substack, and then the notes from my studies I post on my old Tumblr blog. So I read Audre Lorde's Cancer Journals. Just a quick note on Audre Lorde. I think most of us are familiar with her, but she was a self-described Black lesbian poet, a scholar. She contributed significantly to the development of intersectionality. She grew up in Harlem, and her parents were from Grenada, so she's one of our Caribbean siblings. The Cancer Journal specifically explored excerpts of her time as she was being treated for breast cancer and experienced a double mastectomy. She talks about the aftermath of such, as well as reflects on what it means to be a person experiencing cancer who is also Black and lesbian in a anti-Black, racist, heterosexist, ableist world. Let's go to that slide, please. I chose this text because I want to write something similar with sickle cell, and there aren't a lot of role models because of the way sickle cell is stigmatized and siloed within our society, and and that's in part due to its association with Blackness, but it's also due to how ableism and disability works in our society, even within the Black community. Um, and I pulled this quote from one of the readings with Audre Lorde talking about why it's important to us, for us to raise our voice and express our feelings. Oops. Some other frameworks that kind of informed my studies was thinking about Black disability politics, which is a term coined by Sally Schalk. Intersectionality, of course, term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And then specifically Talila A. Lewis's definition of around ableism, which I didn't want to pull the full quote because I don't have their full permission. But one thing that really stands out to me in that definition is that you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. And we can see this as Black folks or folks who are otherwise othered, you start to be categorized as mad or somehow unwell for experiencing the life that you live or experiencing your body just as it is. A quick 101 about sickle cell. It's the most common inherited genetic disorder in the world, despite being one of the most underfunded diseases and understudied. It doesn't just impact people of African descent. It actually impacts anybody in the red. So any area where malaria was a serious problem, it's believed that sickle cell developed as a defense to that. So all those dark red spots all over the world is where people with sickle cell can be found. So some of the overlaps that I found in our text was just the conversation about mortality. So I pulled some quotes. The sickle cell diaries are my writing, cancer journals, and most of the things in the overlap are Audre Lorde's. But what I really found was that there is this compounded isolation that one experiences when you're multiply marginalized, of course. But the difference is between living with sickle cell and sorry guys, there's people walking up to my house. Living with sickle cell and living with cancer is that sickle cell is a lifelong experience. So for me, I have always been aware that my disease could kill me. Whereas a lot of folks who live or develop cancer, that is a new experience for them to be in their 30s or their 20s or their 40s and discover, or their 70s and discover that their life might end because of a disease. I think it's also, yeah. I think the other thing that is different with sickle cell and with cancer, but also similar, is that
That's time.
oh, okay. Well, I'll write about it on my Substack.
I love that the threat is to keep writing about it because period. Next we have Crystal Hines.
Okay, I need to share my screen. I don't know if okay, there we go. Share. Okay, also, I'm just going to read from the text that I wrote. It's basically just a mini essay. Also, my name is Crystal, and I studied the Black art cycle through Black art collectives. I chose the subject because of the current state of Black culture and communities in America. I founded an organization 5 years ago that is dedicated to Black and Latino artists. And despite its many successes, I've paused this year to learn more about how we've come together in the past. In doing so, I've discovered a pattern in our history that may explain some of the cultural and creative struggles we have today. During Reconstruction in the late 1800s, Black folks commune in churches and schools. However, in the arts, Black and white patrons commune together in the North. Wealthy Black and white families hosted intimate salons in their homes to support the work of Black artists, while people in the South communed in secret, communicating through the art of quilting and print work. Artists at the time were torn between producing commission work, often at the request of wealthy whites, or independent work that would be ultimately purchased by wealthy whites. The independent work, however, often depicted the life of the Black person as it truly was post-enslavement. White abolitionist and activist Angelina E. Gremke was quoted saying, "Until the pictures of the slaves' sufferings were drawn and held up to the public gaze, no Northerner had any idea of the cruelty of the system, and those who had lived in the South wept in secret places over the sins of oppression." Prints are powerful appeals. In 1917, at the start of the Great Migration in the Harlem Renaissance, philosopher Alan Locke wanted to establish the African American artist as its own distinctive cultural identity, free of European and white American influence. In contrast, while the artists and art workers of this era were Black, the patrons were majority white who were funding and supporting the work of Black artists, and therefore had expectations of seeing Black primitivism as they felt it was more palatable and realistic to their idea of Black life. Nevertheless, affluent Black patrons, notably Arturo Schomburg and Alelia Walker, Madam C.J. Walker's daughter, continued to support the needs of the Black artists. Oh, I skipped one. There she is. Once the Great Depression hit, with the support of FDR's Work in Progress administration, artists turned to building centers, galleries, and guilds to support each other throughout the North and Midwest. The purpose and function of these organizations during this time was to utilize and subsidize the federal support, but also to create community that provided for the Black artists in spite of white or government support. Ultimately, while some of the guilds survived to present day, most were dismantled and defunded due to World War II and the paranoia of whiteness. The underlying question throughout this Renaissance was one that artist David C. Driscoll asked: was it better to be a Negro artist and develop a racial art, or to be an American artist who was a Negro? Another point raised by artist Archibald Motley in discussing the Black poet, musician, actor, and artist was, all of these aforementioned portrayals are serious original interpretations of the Negro. There is nothing borrowed, nothing copied, just an unraveling of the Negro soul. So why should the Negro painter, the Negro sculptor mimic that of which the white man is doing, when he has such an enormous, colossal field practically all his own, portraying his own people historically, dramatically, hilariously, but honestly? And who knows the Negro race and the Negro soul and the Negro heart better than himself? Artists throughout this time saw division between those wanting to seek racial parity through the arts versus some who just wanted to create regardless of the white man's opinion and support. The theory and conclusion I've come to is that every time Black artists have built collective infrastructure, they have been undermined by two forces simultaneously: internal disagreement about the purpose of Black art and external extraction by white patrons, institutions, and systems. And those two forces are not independent. The difference now is speed and reach. In 2026, a Black artist can reach every corner of this world, which is both rewarding and terrifying. Because our economic and political position in this country hasn't changed much over the years, our division on our art has remained. We struggle to gatekeep or maintain the integrity of our culture, not solely due to our own desires, but in part because we want both recognition and ownership simultaneously from a country that is structurally committed to withholding both. Black art has been commodified as the main source of culture globally, regardless of the condition of Black life. The question Motley asked in 1940 is the same question we are asking in 2026, and the fact that we are still asking it is the answer in itself.
That's time.
Oh, yes. I love that I did that. Okay, thank you so much, Amber. And thank you, Tia. And thank you to all of you. I've learned so much so far. So thank you so much.
Portia, you're on deck. Or you're up now.
Great. I can share my screen. Or maybe I can't. It's not showing me the right page.
You should be able to.
Okay, let me see if it's showing the right page. I can't tell what page it's showing.
Let's see. Oh, did she leave?
Uh-oh. She might have cut herself out.
Okay.
Come back.
We can fix this. Come back.
Yes. Okay, good.
All right. Sometimes you gotta, blow into the game, hit reboot.
Okay, let's try again. It was saying that I needed a permission.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
Hi, everyone. I'm Portia Demera, and I am going to talk about, well, I put it all together in this one term, epiphenomenal ecological epiphanies. One thing you should know about me is I love alliteration. So what is epiphenomenal? It is a derivative of epiphenomena, which is a secondary phenomenon accompanying another caused by it specifically. So I'm just going to jump into like using it in a sentence, and even better than using it in a sentence, I'm going to take you directly to where I picked this term up from. Um, as part of my study for the study hall, I've read Pan-African Social Ecology by Modibo Kadali. And in the text, I came across this passage. The policy of a government is epiphenomenal, meaning it is always in response to something. It appears to be real, but it is not real in the form that it appears. Policies do not initiate anything. Government sees a need based on its interest, then institutes whatever program or policy it needs to stay afloat. What this passage was actually describing was the fact that um, during Reconstruction, the Reconstruction period, what General Sherman actually found was that the Geechee people in the Carolinas were already um, dividing and working the rice plantations that they had been enslaved upon. And so what happened is that they built out the policy, I think it's Field Order number 15, which was the one that put into place the Freedmen's Bureau and the idea of 40 acres and a mule. They actually created that policy in response to what our ancestors were already doing on the land. So the idea that government actually exists to systematize something, it's not that the government is working to create or to progress something. It's responsive. And I saw that across the board in all of my studies. I ended up reading 3 different books. And I'm going to get into how that happened a little bit here. Um, so what I picked up from each of the books, the other two being what is here, Original Sins, The Miseducation of Black and Native Children and the Construction of American Racism by Eve L. Ewing, as long as Grass Grows, The Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock by Dina Gilio Whitaker, was that what is happening, um, like we all understand white supremacy and capitalism and colonization and how much that has impacted and impeded our growth as humans, and it continues to do so to this day. Um, what is I'm picking up through my study, and it's so funny because I was reading I was reading Pan-African Ecology and As Long as Grass Grows for the study hall, and then Libby gave me access to Original Sins, and it just tied in so magically to what I was already reading that I realized what is actually happening is that the function of policy, the function of these systems of white supremacy is to disconnect us from our ways of knowing that our ancestors were already practicing, as with the Geechee people um, during Reconstruction. So one of the notes I'll take from the Original Sins is that one of the social functions of school has been to punish Black and Native children, to socialize them to be accustomed to surveillance and control so that they can be effectively policed as adults, to accept external control rather than bodily autonomy. So with this in mind, not only are we being positioned from a young age to disconnect ourselves from the understanding of being able to control our own bodies, we're also being taught that we're supposed to expect for external systems to have better care for our bodies than we interact with them ourselves. Um, and then it kind of like carried on this idea that I was working on from reading As Long as Grass Grows, the idea that there's clear connections between our bodies and the earth and the planet, but that has also been severed. Um, and that was this note here about food is the conduit between people and place that ensures cultural longevity and personal physical vitality. Indigenous cultural resources were systematically destroyed with the intention of successfully starving people out of their ancestral areas. So what
That's time.
colonization has done over time is basically sever all of our connections. And so those were the epiphanies that I made, and I will continue to share this work through Misfits Dialogues.
Wonderful. Denise is up next, or up now. My apologies, Denise Shante.
Throughout our past 6 weeks together, I've been slowly and sensuously studying the interiorities and intersections of Black disabled life, productivity, culture, and trying to remain well as a published author. My material was and still is the 3-day wellness diary by Akweke Emezi, Nigerian-born, disabled, and transgender storyteller and visual artist. There are many ways I could have moved through the study, but my intuition and the material spirit were giving clear instructions. Let each encounter with the page be a pleasurable refusal to leave your body behind in the process. Witness what's possible when sensation and feltness guide the way you read, study, and access knowledge. I listened. That listening led to me creating a list of study practices focused on sensuousness and embodiment. These practices became experiments I could explore each week, so this wellness diary could affect my entire being. Before I share a glimpse into one of those practices, I invite you to be in your body too. As you're listening and witnessing, notice how your body responds to a word, an image. Notice what sensations, thoughts, and memories start moving and tingling at the edges of your skin. On Tuesday, June 22nd at 8:45 a.m., Amezi shares their slow morning ritual and repetitive breakfast recipe because repetition offers the mind more ease when there's so much to manage physically day to day. I wanted to imagine myself there in the soft and steady routine they described. I wanted to reenact the moments, to taste what they tasted. On Sunday, April 19th, the day after study hall, I went to the Mercado to get a basil plant. It's Monday morning now, 11:59 a.m. I gathered all of the ingredients in the kitchen, but not until holding the first pill in my hand, taking more medications, checking my sugar levels, journaling, sitting at the altar with my cat Nora, and replacing the blood glucose sensor on my lower back. Then I could start cooking breakfast. Counting carbs after cracking eggs to baste them. I had to look up, how do you make basted eggs? I kept the basil plant outside on the porch so, like Amezi, I too could be forced outside into the air, the sun, the plants. The taste of basil is fading away from my tongue as I write this, but after eating the breakfast, on a plate I painted, now saturated in egg yolk that dripped from the gluten-free toast, I sat down to reread their diary entry. I wanted to read it again with the basil still alive, still lingering in my mouth while reading out loud. I can taste the lemon that I squeezed into the ice water. I never put ice in my water, but I did this morning. I wanted everything to be as Amezi wrote it, adding in my imagination and the realities of my own morning rhythms. This entire process feels intimate, like I'm bending time and experiencing their words as I was meant to experience them, beyond the page, pulsing throughout my entire being. Connecting more deeply and sensuously with the material each week became its own wellness diary, a small but potent record of my Black disabled life. I was there studying and sensing long enough to also recognize the patterns in Amezi's wellness practices and how they could too. From slow mornings to garden pleasures to somatic therapy, tending to the body before writing anything at all is the through line. Tending is writing. And studying this truth through the body is a necessary kind of savoring, a way of knowing I deserve to indulge. By the last entry, what came through is a remembering of what's possible when we invite our bodies to connect with the essence of literary expressions in media through feeling. My body's left with the desire to continue being inside this mode of study and inviting you to do the same. From June to November, I'm offering sensuous reading and study, a monthly ritual for creative writers to practice reading and studying with our whole bodies. The notes, dreams, and practices I've created during our study hall have shaped this offering. We'll ask ourselves, what if we let the materials, media, and texts we love transform and touch our entire being? What if the art of reading and studying could be a ritual rooted in our sensuousness, an embodied practice that becomes a part of who we are, a feeling that carries us to freedom? Covered in the belief that studying can be sensuous, I trust our bodies, minds, and spirits to feel the answers.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Toby.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen really quick. Can you all see my screen? Or oh,
Here it comes.
can you see anything?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. I always get so confused with the updates on share screen or
Now
share
it's back
window.
to
So,
you. Oh, okay.
oh, it's
You
back
have
to me.
now it's your
Now it's
presentation.
me. Okay. Can you see it fully or is it like small?
You're making it small.
Okay, so okay. I'm gonna just, if people can see it, I will use it like this just so I can see it fully. Um, I just want to make sure everybody can see. Well, my name is Toby. I'm going to be presenting on the Black film tradition of hospitality, gathering, and service. Just a little bit about me. I'm a cultural artist, designer, curator, educator, and creative agency founder. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, so that's the Zap and Roger reference. And a lot of my work has to do with stories of becoming, self-discovery, and my appreciation for beauty in our lives. So I have been doing some thinking and writing around what I'm calling the Dillard Brewster Project. Um, I'll share a little bit more about the name later, but this kind of thought started about 2 years ago. And it simply started with the question how and why we gather. Um, and part of that was from my work in non-traditional hospitality as well as traditional hospitality. If you think, restaurants, hotels, things like that. But also wanting to kind of dig a little deeper on my cultural connections to it. And the lens that I come to it with is hospitality culture and design from a Black queer film lens. And kind of the mission of my work with this is to honor, celebrate, and study the Black film tradition of hospitality and space making. Um, a phrase that I use or a term that I use to describe this work is womanist hospitality. And this is just kind of a definition that I'm using with it, which is um, to characterize an ethos and practice that centers and nurtures Black women in films through communal fellowship. So, with that understanding, I'm not only looking at I'm not limited by traditional hospitality that we tend to think about it when we think about the hospitality industry, but it also gives me the expansive space to think about other roles and other sites of hospitality. So, artists, designers, curators, facilitators, parents, guardians, people that manage property, all these different points that have to do with people gathering as well as sites. Being one that I love to look at is the Black church, Black women in the Black church, Black women's leadership in the Black church specifically, um, cookouts, house parties, juke joints, things like that. The material that I kind of spent the 6 weeks with is called Dear Sisters, a Womanist Practice of Hospitality. This was the first thing that I came across when I Googled the word womanist hospitality, which was just kind of a thought in my brain that I wanted to see, is there anything out there? And I was able to find this. Uh, Lynn uses a word or a term, concealed gatherings, often in the book, which I really resonated with because of how the importance of our private spaces can be for our growth and resilience. Some other language and frameworks I'm using in this work, like I said, womanist hospitality, Black film sensibilities, and Black feminist slash womanist design. A big part of how I'm looking at hospitality culture and culture is as a design practice of how we are forming and building these places and spaces. So the sensibilities and the design and the lens and all of that is really important to me. My importance of the space makers and the tradition keepers. I have these two pictures of my grandmothers here. Um, because I feel like one of my professional experiences or several professional experiences that I've had is this arrogance that only white men know hospitality, which is bonkers to me. I get very frustrated that the people and the people that have come from the peoples that have done the hosting, the cleaning, the tending, the farming, the all of this are then seen as not good enough when it comes to being leaders in this space. So I often look at, like I said, the hospitality that I grew up with and some of the models of that I grew up with. And these two women definitely have shown me that. Part of the work I'm doing is also trying to distill these ideas into art and media work. So here are some of the things that I've posted online around hospitality, politics of it, the cultural experiences of it, and the visual histories of it as well. Um, like I said, really rooted in the deep connection and opportunity between hospitality and
So
healing. Okay, perfect. If you would like to know more, you can check me out here. My websites, my TikToks, Instagram, Substacks, and all of that are listed here.
Wonderful. Next, we have Carmen.
Hi, okay, good morning, everyone. Let me get my screen shared. Okay, can folks see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
I think you need to go in the presentation mode.
Did it not go? Okay, there we go. Sorry, my laptop is going so slow.
Take your time.
You're fine.
Okay. Here we go. All right, you all should be seeing, no. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So good morning or afternoon, every morning and afternoon. My name is Carmen Dixon, and I am an Atlantan, but based in New York City for the past 15 years. This is a skim over the chapter titled The Pitfalls of Liberalism from Kwame Ture's book, Stokely Speaks, from Black Power to Pan-Africanism. And as a native Atlantan, I'm taking a brief look at how the Black liberal shows up in Atlanta. I should first mention that Kwame Ture offers a foundation for understanding how the oppressor interprets and will violence. Defining power is like how violent one can be towards their enemy. And the state has the power to define, validate, and illegitimize violence. And they do so by denying centuries of physical and psychological harm that Black people have suffered at the hands of state-sanctioned systemic racism. Teray then shows us the flip side, where the only time violence becomes an issue of immorality is when it is employed towards the oppressor. So the state is defining property violence, property defacement as violence, and that's our starting point. So these first images represent, let me just say, I'm not going to say more about how violence is defined. You can read more about that because I don't want I don't want this channel being monitored or demonetized or anything like that. So I think that it is definitely worth going back and reading more about that. But these first images represent, the first one is in 2015, on Hillary Clinton's campaign trail for the presidential race, she came to visit Clark Atlanta University. And there was a small cadre of student protesters chanting Black Lives Matter before they were allegedly pushed and led out of the space by Congressman John Lewis, pop star Usher, and other folks. The second photo that's not showing up, okay, was actually a photo in response to the defacing of property in downtown Atlanta in response to the George Floyd murder. And it was a press conference when then Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, rappers T.I. and Killer Mike actually admonished protesters and appealed to them to go home and instead strategize and organize, because Atlanta does not do violence in response to extrajudicial police murders. So I would say that Touré characterizes the liberals' role as one who exists from stopping the oppressed from confronting the oppressor based on the assumption that a confrontation is going to be ineffective. So the liberal often calls for law and order to the oppressor to stop the confrontation. And what the liberal really wants is change that's not going to endanger their position in society. This is like, I just want to get back to brunch crowd. Another thing that the liberal often confuses is the difference between influence and power. They typically seek influence and not power because they don't have power. And so where does this exceptionalism come from? It was actually a marketing campaign to quell public-facing racism and promote and attract business. The white power structure wanted Atlanta to be the center of commerce in the Southeast and knew that it wouldn't happen with overtly racist at the helm. So former Mayor William B. Hartsville crafted the slogan, Atlanta is a city too busy to hate, and Ivan Allen Jr. used it as his campaign slogan to get elected as mayor. And then lastly, I just want to share a couple of photos from Atlanta's rich history of uprisings, because according to Atlanta, like, we don't do this here, but we have a very rich and deep history in this. This photo is Summer Hill uprisings, the Summer Hill community in response to a police shooting of a Black man named Harold Prather. They called for Mayor Allen to address systemic inequities in Black communities, but he essentially focused on moralizing and delegitimizing the defacement of property. And the second photo references 2020 protesters defacing the famed CNN logo. Not seen are police cars that were set ablaze and broken windows in downtown businesses. And in closing, I would say that the liberal makes promises they can't keep. So they tell the oppressor that they can keep the oppressed in line. They tell the oppressed that they can alleviate their suffering, neither of which is true. So eventually the oppressed begins to recognize the liberal for who they are. And the liberal, yes. So in closing, I just say that Touré says there's a final confrontation where if the oppressed really wants a revolutionary change, they have no choice but to rid themselves of those liberals in their rank. Thank you.
Fabulous. Amazing. Next we have Patience.
Hi, are you guys all able to hear me? I'm gonna try sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay, one moment. Okay, great. Is everyone able to see this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patience Stuckey, and today I will be giving just some of my opening thoughts on M. Jackie Alexander's Pedagogies of Crossing related to surviving the empire. I first want to just talk about my intentions in reading this work and what I'm presenting to you all today. I'm reading this as more of a map and a Bible and a guidebook for survival, specifically for queer women and POC folk, femmes alike, Native women, Indigenous women, all of these marginalizations that Jackie brings up, really a guidebook for how we can survive and sort of be nimble and navigate the modern American empire. And I actually want to start with an offering from the introduction, the very first page of this work. Jackie Alexander says, "I did not awake this morning to the deafening noise of sirens or the rocketing sound of nonstop bombs. I did not awake to the missiles that fall like rain from the sky, exploding on contact with land, staking out huge craters within the earth, collapsing people into buildings, trees into rubble, men into women, hands into feet, children into dust. I awoke this morning from a comfortable bed, avoiding the interminable queues for rations of fuel or food, because I have the privilege to choose to live, unlike so many who have lost their lives in the insatiable service of imperialism." I think it's very important in this space today, in this virtual space of intellectualism, to recognize our own privilege in even being able to gather in this way. In our present times, we are in a state of war. The empire is at a state of crumbling, and we need to acknowledge that privilege and also figure out how to leverage it here. And I think Jackie Alexander offers some things that can get us started there. So in this, I really want to kind of plant a seed that leaves us contemplative about our own positioning and how we can leverage that in the impending fall of the empire. So some notes that Jackie Alexander gives us on the current state. She vividly outlines the rhetoric, the myth, the ideology, and the technologies of violence that the modern empire uses to kind of insist upon itself. And she characterizes these methods that are some of them which are listed on the screen. She characterizes them as an ideological force field. And if we look at today's media, propaganda, TV, any commercial that you see, everything from the Ram truck commercials to the GLP-1 ads, everything is feeding into this economy of ideology. And that ideology, it becomes not only myth and rhetoric, but it becomes legislation. Those legislations become boundaries, and those boundaries are things that we cannot cross. So how do we survive this empire? How do we survive these boundaries that are created around and against us? So we have a few offerings here. One of the tentpole themes throughout this work is community. So the myth of empire, of course, is one of isolation. It's individual merit, but we know that we are a communal people. We have always been a communal people, and we cannot attain individual or global liberation without each other first. Also, she talks about interruption, the idea of transgressing and disrupting the curated lines, the intentional lines of empire by being that whom we are, even if it doesn't neatly fit into those lines. We can't navigate citizenship, this ever moving goalpost of citizenship, this ever moving goalpost of sovereignty, this promise of the empire and the government giving you security that was never actually going to be given to you. We can't navigate that in a way that wants to make the empire comfortable because it's never been interested in making us comfortable. And of course, memory. We can't lose ourselves in the crossing. We must remember our lives and the lives of those who fought before us. This work is ancestrally co-written. There are many ancestors that came to visit Jackie Alexander in the writing of this work and in the curating of a guidebook for our people. We must find our literature, rebuild the narratives that they tried to burn down, and create new narratives that are separate from the will of the empire. And on this idea of memory, I do want to bring up just a small snippet. Jackie Alexander says that we live in a country that seems to be bent on inculcating a national will to amnesia, to excise certain past, particularly when a great wrong has been done. And she later goes on to talk about how sometimes even forgetting is forgotten, what pain can be so deep that you forget that you've forgotten. And that's why we need to commune with the ancestors to ensure that we are forging a path forward outside of the empire. So lastly, I offer the answer. How do we survive the empire? We remember. That's my timer. We remember together, we cross together, and we are always in a state of crossing. We're in a constant state of crossing these boundaries, these borders that are created against us, these transgressions, these milestones, these time planes, and everything in between. We have to do it together. We have to do it in memory, and we have to do it in community with the ancestors. So that is my offering for today. Thank you so much. This is just the beginning of my contemplation on this work, and I appreciate you, Tia and Amber, for creating this space.
Perfect time. This is like the best thing that has ever happened to me. Y'all are so amazing. Okay, next we have Q.
Hey everyone, hope you're well. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so hey everyone, my name is Key Alexander, aka Dr. Key, and I'm here to talk about Miss Major Taught Me based on Miss Major Speaks Conversations with a Black Trans Revolutionary. So this book was really special and important to read during this time because it's literally a series of conversations between Major and Toshio. So I have a couple of quick facts about Major. She was born in Chicago in 1946. If you don't know who Major is, I need you to figure that out. She is a Black trans woman. She has joined the ancestor realm. It hasn't even been a full year yet. So she was born in Chicago in 1946. She was a Scorpio. I feel like one of the words I use to describe Major is relentless, and that feels very Scorpio coded. She lived in Chicago, New York, San Diego, Bay Area, and she was last living in Arkansas before she transitioned. She was a parent, she was a community organizer, she was formerly incarcerated, she was a sex worker, she was a Stonewall vet. These were not identities, but rather experiences that shaped her worldview. And she became a beloved ancestor in October of 2025. So I read this book because I am passionate about Black, queer, and trans ways of knowing, and I am really curious about what they have to teach other people in the world. So that's really what I wanted to tend to. So I basically distilled this down to three lessons that I feel like Major taught me, Major is teaching all of us, that I'd like to share with you all. That literally just comes from her sitting down with other people, talking a lot of shit. She swore a lot, which I loved. And I think the beautiful thing is that there's someone like we think about like someone like Angela Davis, and we think about somebody like Miss Major, who actually shared a lot of experiences, had a lot of shared politics, but because Angela was an academic, um, there's ways that, because she was light skinned, because she was cis, there was lots of ways that like they thought of the same kind of politics, they had the same kind of things, but we kind of lift up some people and we don't lift up other people. But Major was also never really in it for the uplift, which informs a lot of the lessons that she taught us. So the first one is that we keep us safe, right? Major was really, really big on self-organizing for trans people, organizing for ourselves. And she said, basically, we actually know how to meet our needs the best. And so we actually have to do that. And it's up to other people to support us to get the resources to be able to do so. But it is really, we are actually the experts at meeting our own needs. She also really kind of talked about safety a lot. Like, what are the ways that trans people keep each other safe, literally by knowing, if you're working on the street with the girls and somebody gets into a car and it didn't look quite right, literally making sure you're writing down license plates and the makes of cars and stuff like that. Like starting from that kind of stuff was the organizing around safety that she did, making sure that everybody would accounted for each other. And that really any competition between us is like the powers that be win when we do that. And so it's really up to us to keep each other safe in that regard. Fuck the binary. And she would have said fuck. And I think the big thing is like Major didn't care what your identity was. She didn't care what you called yourself. She didn't care how you dressed. She didn't care if you were a brick. She didn't care if you were like whatever. She didn't care. What she cared about is if you were able to live with dignity, if you were able to live in a way that shows dignity to other people. That's what was important to her. And so I think it was something that there's this assumption that, um, older trans women are like not with the non-binary thing or whatever. And like Major was always like, did not really care, didn't subscribe to the binary, always thought that it was beyond that. She always used to say, tell people that she's comfortable with all pronouns. And the last big lesson from this is free them all. She was an abolitionist. She was someone who was politicized in while she was incarcerated by someone who was in the Panthers, who was part of the Attica uprising. And so she learned really young and through her own experiences with incarceration and also just like supporting other trans women, particularly just the way that the state worked, the way that the nonprofit industrial complex operated as an arm of the state.
That's
Um,
time.
yeah, and so she just said, never trust any of them and free us all. So that's what I have to say. Thank you so much. If you want to keep in touch, there's my email. Grateful to Amber and Tia for a beautiful space, and thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Key. Next, we have Shantae. Oh, period. Shantae, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, not me being muted. Sorry, y'all. So y'all can see my screen. I don't know if y'all can see me as well, but hey y'all, I'm Shantae, aka Tay. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a writer, curator, mystic, singer, and collector of many things. On my newsletter, Things I Collected, which you can find at shantae.substack.com. I mainly muse about music, but I have also used this platform to profile style and aesthetics, which brings me to my topic for today. The book that I focused on for the past 6 weeks is The Mother Lode, 100 Plus Women Who Made Hip Hop by Clover Hope, featuring beautiful illustrations by Rochelle Baker. One key thing this book reminded me of is the 4 elements of hip hop: DJing, MCing, aka rapping, breakdancing, and graffiti. Some consider knowledge to be the 5th pillar. I'd personally add fashion to the list. My synthesis of the book inspired me to focus on hip hop as a visual language. Therefore, I have coined the term Hood Femme Fabulous to encapsulate the aesthetic that I observed. I've curated an interactive mood board, which I have dropped into the Zoom chat, to provide reference points featuring many scans, screenshots, and memorabilia from my personal collection. I've also included myriad music videos and a few links to articles I've written about women in hip hop. For instance, I have interviewed Baby Mother, which I have added the PDF for you here. And I've also been quoted in Merriam-Webster for an article that I wrote on Cardi B. And here's that quote here, if it'll load. It says something about stage fright. For some reason, it doesn't want to load, but that's the gist of that. So, what is Hood Femme Fabulous? Hood Femme Fabulous leans into Black women and femmes' ingenuity. It's our ability to always make some shit shake and to craft brilliance from what's readily available to us. I will forever champion the hood rats and the around the way girls. Therefore, Hood Femme Fabulous is my love letter to the big sisters, older cousins, mamas, and grandmamas who consistently look fly even under pressure. Some visual markers include bold colors and prints, elaborate and slick hairstyles in every hue under the sun, swooped up French rolls with a major bayang, or immaculately gelled finger waves. It's a 27-piece quick weave or bubble braids with colorful rubber bands. It's cornrows and twists and beads and clips. Designer goods paired with swap meet exclusives and rare secondhand finds. Textures and patterns galore. Rhinestones, pearls, and gemstones, grills and gold teeth glistening from a smile. Rings intuitively stacked on every finger. It's large earrings and even bigger glasses. Layered necklaces in mixed metals. Clear stripper heels. It's stilettos, pumps in the club. If Hood Femme Fabulous were an emoji, it would be the painted nails with the brown skin tone. Think Lil' Kim in collaboration with stylist Misa Hilton, or Eve working with the recently departed Kite Brewster. It's Baps as referenced in the WAP video by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, which I do have that somewhere on here. It may be considered gaudy to the untrained eye, but who cares, because we ain't getting dressed for them naysayers anyway. Hood Femme Fabulous often mixes the soft with the hard and may veer into androgynous territory, which is why I've included songs like Sir Lady Make 'Em Fall by Liv and Sir Princess Bad Bitch by Yaya Bay. Hood Femme Fabulous is also for the edgy ones who ain't afraid to get rough in the mosh pit, who like punk and angst with their rap, you know, the boom with the bap. With this inspiration board, I'm thinking about the past, present, and future of hip hop. I've specifically included this image of Millie Jackson here, which again, they won't load in full screen, but I'm going to circle it right here because, and this is from her album Feeling Bitchy, because Roxanne Shante considered Jackson to be one of the first female rappers, and I concur. Hood Femme Fabulous is for honoring the women who hopped on the track with male rap collectives and asked where them dollars at, RIP Gangsta Boo. It's for the ones who rep their city no matter how far they may travel. I'm also highlighting those who've carried these sounds and aesthetics into the now, including Carrie Foe, Sally Mata, Samara Sin, Jungle Pussy, Anicia, Tia Corinne, Trim, and more. Thanks to this study hall, Hood Femme Fabulous is now an ongoing project, so the work doesn't stop here. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and remember to uplift the hood, the femme, and the fabulous here, now, and forever. Thank you.
Wonderful. You still had 10 seconds, but you did it. Next, we have trivia.
All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Tariva Johnson. No worries on the mispronunciation. It's fine.
My apologies. I'm going to get it right.
Okay. Let me add my slide after that phenomenal presentation. All right, can everyone see my slide and hear me okay?
Yes, everything is perfect.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever we are. I'm joining you from Easley, South Carolina, and it's been a real joy to be a part of this group, this first cohort, right, of the Mako Study Hall, one of the peppers, ripening on the vine, right, on our at our own pace. So the book that I decided to read over the past 6 weeks is On Morrison by Namwali Serpell. Um, when I was putting together this slide, I was even marveling at the ways that Serpell made even the color scheme look like one of Morrison's early editions of her text, Jazz. And so when I first came to this text, I was looking for a way to engage with Toni Morrison. And the co-creation, like the Go Study Hall, was perfect. Thank you so much to Amber. Thank you so much to Tia and fellow participants. So my presentation is entitled Morrisonian Theory. Not telling me my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully I'm not going in and out.
You just came
Don't do
back.
me.
You're good now.
Okay. So my presentation. Okay. um, my presentation is entitled Morrisonian Theory. The structure is the argument. Project in my graduate work and in my teaching, I'm always means of creation and critique. And so Toni Morrison really was that girl, right? In terms of being a writer, professor, and editor, a mother, a Black woman, who dominated and brought spaces like Lorraine, Ohio, her bachelor's work at Howard, graduate work, her MA in English literature at Cornell, being an editor that brought so many Black voices, right, through the marketplace with Random House Publishing, teaching multiple spaces, but her last spot, Princeton University, earning a Nobel Prize, right? And being proudly difficult, which Serpell begins her text telling us about. And so in her difficulty, we are encouraged to think about what kind of difficult we want to be. How can we resist outside pressures, right, that compel us to make others comfortable and instead refuse to explain, as Morrison does on the page, refuse to oversimplify and spoon feed readers and instead come with a culture and a voice, right, that is storied, that is history, and that we have to rise to the occasion to understand and to unpack. So when I'm thinking about the structure is the argument, Serpell's work models this as well as Morrison's body of work. So in Serpell's book, we get 10 chapters that focus on 10 of Morrison's major works. There's close readings, there's myriad literary terms, terms I didn't even know. Um, think if you're familiar with Always Black and Cree Miles' work over on Instagram or other online spaces, right? Her annotations of poetic devices of immaculate rap verses, these sort of terms litter, right, the pages of Serpell's work. And they're all connected to what Morrison is able to do in her writing. Serpell gives us a text that is delightfully dense. Think about Daphne Brooks' work or Amani Perry's work, where we're getting really deep dives into Serpell's subject matter and are learning how to read Morrison in new ways. So when I'm thinking about the ways that Morrison's structure is the argument, I want to think about the chapter Serpell gives us about Morrison offers us, right, is that Jazz, the novel, was Morrison's attempt, according to her, to reclaim the era from F. Scott Fitzgerald. So you're not going to have this Black musical tradition, right, that is going to live through the novel, The Great Gatsby. We're not going to think about 1920s and flappers and not think Harlem and instead think about The Green Light and Gatsby. So this kind of like reclamation work, right, is something that Morrison was aiming to do in her writing. She also talks about jazz itself as one of the most vital artistic forms in the world. It symbolizes an incredible kind of improvisation, a freedom in which a great deal of risk is involved. So, thinking again about Morrison as proudly difficult and courageous, bold on the page, being willing to tell us various stories that are complicated and rich and nuanced and might scare the reader, but ultimately find ways to keep us engaged. Uh, the novel Jazz begins with a sound. It begins with like teeth kissing or sucking. So the very first word is here next to this photo of Morrison. So like that sort of sound. So that literally begins the
That's
text.
fine.
Okay. My table here to the right talks a lot more about how Morrison brings elements of jazz into her writing. So we always had everything we needed, right, to create this work. Our culture is what we can use to build the structure and the argument. Feel free to email me at tariva.johnson@gmail.com to talk more about these ideas. And thank you so much.
Next we have Taylor.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Iconic, amazing. Okay, hello everybody. I'll try to get through as much of this as I can, and I don't think I'm going to. My name is Taylor. I'm based in Los Angeles. And welcome to Blackness and the Never-Ending Dystopia. Before we get started, it's really important for you to understand, just as like a general understanding of me, I have a really strong affinity for the end of the world. Like I think about the apocalypse a lot. I think about how to survive it. I think about all the ways it could go down. I'm really interested in like the internet going out, all of the electricity going out, because I watched the show Revolution, highly recommend. As a writer, as a creator, as a reader, as a learner, I really gravitate towards stories about world-ending events, dystopian societies, and like the personal versus societal apocalypse, right? Um, oh no, there we go, beautiful. So, when I saw a book called Black Apocalypse Afrofuturism at the End of the World, I had to read it, obviously. In this book, the author, Tavia Nyong'o, introduces the reader to a bunch of different philosophical frameworks, right? Basically, to argue that fiction and theory are tools that allow us to dream about fixing what was broken and reconnecting to what was like torn apart from us. So he uses like a seemingly like escapist genre, like science fiction, and motifs like an alien invasion to touch on the realities and like the cultural anxiety that Black Americans experience, like the uncanny valley sense that like something is off, something is not right here, right? And that's where we have the term Black counter speculation, a term that Tabia Nyong'o coined, in this book. Um, Basically, it's a gathering term for the varieties of strategies that we take on to refuse the future that is planned for us, and can't be reduced into single strategies, right? So Afrofuturism, Afropessimism, long varied theories, lots of history, etc., cannot be reduced um, collectively, for instance, but it's more so Black counter speculation is an umbrella term for these other theories. What Afrofuturism and Afropessimism sort of have in common, right, that Tavia argues, um, is that they refuse the world as it is. Um, and they refuse the given circumstances of the world and ask that Black people envision a world beyond suffering. So we're looking at science fiction, we're looking at dystopian societies, the idea of the apocalypse, and we're taking these Black theories, we're looking at Black counter speculation of allegories, of fiction, of music, of art, of food, and how Black people can envision a world beyond the suffering that we exist in. Wow, I'm flying through this. Woo! Okay. Hello. Okay. To be Black in America is to already live in a dystopia. I want you to think about every sci-fi movie you've ever seen. Aliens invade, humanity is threatened, and the world comes together to defeat it. Well, the alien is real. It's invaded so many times, and the world did not come together. Think about like COVID-19,
global uprisings, both world wars, 1619, 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. At every single one of those moments, Black people experienced it differently. Things did not get better. There was not a new world order for us that felt good or positive. Our world kept ending, and we had to keep living inside that ending. This is the dystopian society that all of those 2010 teen movies have been warning you about. We are already living in it. We live in a world that doesn't have any threshold or limit to violent dehumanization that could make the world rise up and change things, right? There's like this incredible disorientation of living in a world as a Black American, for instance, that is telling us the world is good while we have known the world's evil. The systems that we live in have only been maintained by convincing us that we are nothing, when in reality, Black enslaved people became globally recognized currency that built empires. There's a whole side tangent I had to delete about how Black people are actually the most valuable people economically in the world. We are the most valuable thing in the world, but I had to delete that for time. But we exist in this absurdity. Being Black is lit, but it's also weird as fuck. We throw knowing glances, side eyes, and silent communications to say something like, I know you fucking lying, to the only other Black person in an all white space. We speak this silent language to survive the gap between what we were told and what we know to be true. This is dystopian. If we do not imagine, we will continue to be erased. Science fiction isn't just entertainment. Everything around us, from the internet, drones, your phone.
That's time.
Oh my God, yay. Okay, learn about science fiction, get into the dystopia, get into the sci-fi. Thank you guys so much for your time. I just want to leave you on this quote. I believe in the world and want to be in it. I want to be in it all the way to the end of it because I believe in another world in the world and I want to be in that. Thank you.
Wonderful. You almost got me because I got lost in the sauce.
It's just that good.
Right. It's my turn. Jay. I'm dialing in from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde land, so-called Portland, Oregon. I feel like this is kind of like part 2 of Taylor's presentation. Like, Taylor, I'm on the same page as you about a lot of things. We have very similar interests. So my presentation is called Built Different, the Black Radical Movements and the Politics of Anti-Fragility. And this is based on a book called Queer Times, Black Futures by Kara Keeling. And one of the premises of the book is that Black radical movements operate on a premise, and this premise really shifts how we understand crisis, that survival is not about enduring the system, but about using its fractures to form new forms of life. So, we've all heard about, oh, Black women are so resilient, so Black people are so resilient. I know I'm tired of it. I'm sure the rest of you are as well. So she makes this really interesting distinction between resilience and anti-fragility. So resilience describes this capacity to withstand shocks, versus anti-fragility is about growing stronger from volatility. And a resilient system, it bounces back from whatever disruption. And an anti-fragile system really gets stronger because of these disruptions. And resilience, it implies you're trying to preserve something. But, as mentioned previously in, the previous presentation, this world is not something that was ever good to us. Why would we want to preserve it as such? So anti-fragility is about the disruption itself being the material that you work with. And she uses the example of the Haitian Revolution. So if you know anything about like future studies or strategic foresight, there's this thing called the cone of possibility. And in the middle of it is like, what is a probable future? And then there's these different layers. And the layer all the way out is the preposterous future, which is like, this probably won't happen. And for them, Haiti, like revolting was the preposterous future. Like, they didn't think that was ever going to happen, but it did happen, and it changed everything. And so really working with that disruptive material rather than trying to preserve that the system that we have now. So she also talks about how the world is shaped by racial capitalism. It is not a permanent reality for us to outlast. In fact, this world, the world organized by racial capitalism, has already ended many times over. And there's this question of like, what is getting built in its place? And the fundamental task for us is to really think about moving beyond preservation and towards invention and world building, as was said, in a previous presentation as well. So Black radical thinkers from Frantz Fanon forward have argued that genuine liberation is not found by recovering what was taken, but by creating what was not yet imagined. So the distinction, of course, matters a lot because, it matters enormously for understanding the staying power of Black radical movements and also the theory of change. And this is a quote that, Frantz Fanon has. So Black futures really requires this recreation and imagination. He refers to it as a real leap. So this is the quote: "I should constantly remind myself that the real leap consists in introducing invention into existence. In the world through which I travel, I am endlessly creating myself. I am a part of being to the degree that I go beyond it." And that contrasts with our modern finance system, which converts every single possible thing into something measurable and exchangeable. And when that logic meets Black life, it reproduces something that's structurally similar to like the plantation ledger. It's a system that treats people as quantities to be calculated, as risks to be managed, and as costs to be minimized. And I love this picture of Saidiya Hartman. She talks about the afterlife of slavery. She coined this term to describe how the political and economic logic of slavery did not end with emancipation. It mutated. So this calculus that once assigned a dollar value to an enslaved person's body continues through systems that produce premature death, mass incarceration, neighborhood disinvestment, and financial exclusion. And this kind of calculus is really exemplified by the Zong massacre, which happened in 1781, where a British ship captain ordered 133 enslaved Africans thrown overboard so that the ship's owners could collect insurance on their quote unquote lost cargo. And the financial and legal logic governing that decision was coherent within that system, within its own terms. The people in the water had already been converted into numbers on a ledger. And that conversion, the reduction of a living person to a calculable unit, is the foundational violence that Black radical movements contest. So it continues in subtler forms every time a system requires Black people to prove their worth in terms that the system itself defines. And in contrast, Sumrall built this cosmology around the premise that the world's organized by racial terrors already ended. This seems binding, but we don't need permission to create a new future. I think that was time. So I'll just end with, we have this, what's called the right to opacity. And this is the insistence that your value in humanity does not require external validation or measurement to be real. And it's this refusal to be made legible on terms that you did not choose. So I just encourage everyone to think of chaos as the clay. So these movements that develop practices, aesthetics, and organizational forms that sustain people while building the conditions of a new world. And so working with that chaos rather than merely enduring it is what anti-fragility means in practice. So thank you. And here's my email and my Instagram, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. Next up, we have Meredith.
All right, and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. All right, everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Meredith L. King. I'm a creative and strategist, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about Black ecology and the 1927 flood of the Mississippi River. So in 1970, when the field of ecology was roughly in its earlier stages, Nathan Hare wrote an essay called Black Ecology and argued that ecology as it was did not consider the environmental realities of Black people, and instead created an environmental movement largely focused on the well-being of white people. This is not really a surprising take at all. Based on the environmental discourse we see today, this makes sense.
Right. But again, this is 2026. That was in 1970. Nathan Hare argued that the environmental movement regarded Black people as part of the pollution that was a threat to the health of the white social body. Translation, the environmental movement as it was in 1970 was built on anti-Blackness and as such would continue to require anti-Blackness to succeed in that way. Again, not a surprising take, but an important one. Hare argued that Black self-determination and the decolonization of the Black race, unquote, are fundamental to solving the environmental crisis. These core ideas were some of the beginnings of the field and the lens of Black ecology, which typically includes the relationship between anti-Blackness, the exploitation of nature, and the climate crisis, as well as the imperative for racial justice and environmental justice to converge and work together. So backing up in time a little bit, in the spring of 1927, after months of heavy rains, inconsistent levees, and a desire to conquer and control nature for capitalist ends, that brought upon the great 1927 flood of the Mississippi River. The flood displaced nearly 640,000 people in states from Illinois to Louisiana and caused about $1 billion worth of damage, and that's in 1927 dollars, right? The 1927 flood's level of destruction is often compared to Hurricane Katrina's. The event impacted the environmental landscape, migration, economic advancement or lack thereof, federal policy, Herbert Hoover's ascent to the presidency, and had lasting effects that we still feel today. Among those effects, the river was manipulated and redirected. The landscape itself physically was shifted to intentionally flood areas where poor Black people lived and extract more and more value from the land. Later, we would see the impact of trying to work against the river's own memory and refusing to see the river itself as part of a larger system. Railroad companies and plantation owners worked with the Red Cross to set up refugee camps for Black people so they wouldn't leave, because if they did, who would be left to work the land and make money for the people who were landowners? Food was scarce and unevenly distributed in camps, disease ran rampant, and treatment by the National Guard was known to be, quote, rough. While the National Guard helped wealthy whites evacuate, they prevented Black refugees from leaving the camps at all, or even having outside visitors. In some documents, Black refugees in camps are referred to as prisoners or inmates. Black men were taken at gunpoint to sandbag the levees, and many did not return. In my own family, my paternal grandmother recalled her father being taken and being gone so long that she feared she would never see him again. On my maternal grandmother's side, a male cousin was dressed as a girl to keep him safe from being taken away because that fear was so large and so real. So why does this all matter? Nathan Hare and also the 1927 flood. The 1927 flood gives us an example of the ways that environmental interventions can and do work hand in hand with anti-Blackness and extractive capitalism to our collective detriment. It's bad for all of us. It shows us what happens when Black ecology is not in play. It shows us what happens when environmental movements see the material conditions of Black people as irrelevant or worse, at odds with saving the earth. So
That's
many,
time.
awesome. So many of the decisions made then created the systems that continue to harm Black folks and our environment now. What was needed in 1927 was needed in 1970, and it's still needed now. And Black ecologies help us think about how to move forward from events like these in a more connected and liberatory way. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. I don't have a screen to share. I don't know why I'm clicking screen share. I'm just going to talk. I did not have time to create a presentation, but also I think because of the content, I felt like it was better to just speak. So my name is Laurel. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based in Chicago, but I'm originally from the DC area, Maryland, to be exact. And my book for study was Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum by Antonia Hilton about Crownsville Hospital in Maryland. And even though I didn't finish the book because it was very dense, and also a lot of the people in the book are, I'm finding now, like people some of my family knows, it ended up being very personal. And that's how I started off going into it. And similar to a lot of people in this group, it then transformed and took a lot of good left turns into something else. But this book is the product of Antonia Hilton's 10 years of research of not just available archive material, but also just records, hospital records, that I think one of the best themes of this book is that a lot of the things that we keep and the things we save, like pictures and files and papers and things that we don't think are important, actually do become important later, because a lot of the records by the hospital were intentionally destroyed in the 60s, but it was on the account of a few staff members who like just thought to go in the basement and just take everything home, stuff that had been damaged, infected with asbestos, and they kept them. And that built a lot of the Maryland State Archives content about Crownsville. Another theme that jumped out that didn't occur to me before was that in the period after Reconstruction, I don't think enough is talked about how, yes, the country was divided and it was a total shit show, but not just for the former slave owners and everyone else, but even for people who were formerly enslaved, that, okay, yes, you're free now, but what does that mean? What does freedom mean in a society that doesn't think you're a person? You have no rights. Even once you do get rights, okay, you have to be over there. And you'll get substandard care, if that, you'll get refuse. And so it's like thinking of people in my family, or even just historical figures, how many people were actually mentally unwell organically? And then how many people were driven crazy, not just from racist treatment, but because you exist in a society that doesn't have a place for you. And even though you are among community, it's like there's no infrastructure. What do I do? I grew up on a plantation. All I knew was whatever my chores were. But now, okay, I'm free, but what does that actually mean? And then thinking of the present, my background is in higher education administration. And I went into that mainly because I went to HBCU. I managed to graduate, but a lot of stuff didn't make sense administratively. And I went in like, okay, I have to study this. I need to know why this doesn't work, like what's going on. And after like 15 years, I realized that a lot of what we think doesn't work, it is working. It's working the way that it's supposed to. Bureaucratic systems that shut people out. You're trying to seek care. We all know health insurance is bullshit in this country. All of that is designed the way it's supposed to, and it's supposed to shut us out. It's supposed to be incomplete. Even the way that we treat students, we approach Black students from a deficit model and not from an asset of like, how can I, what can you already do? How can I help you? It's always, I'm bothered by you, even though I'm in a healthcare position and you clearly need help. And so even though a lot of the content of this book is very heavy, I do think that there's hope in that the campus of Crownsville is still there. It's still sitting empty, and a lot of the family members of former patients of Crownsville and other community members have won and fought the state, and it is now in the process of being retrofitted into, because it's like a large complex, a big land for actual rehabilitation, community projects, and centers. And I think another important theme of this book is that just because something was constructed, and Crownsville was built by its own patients, just because it was constructed in a way of containment to filter and compartmentalize and harm and hurt and kill, it doesn't mean that it can't then later be eventually transformed. And I think it's
our responsibility to do that transformation, but also ownership of like, this is where you've put me, but this is not where I am. And I think for me, I'm going back home next month to Annapolis, actually. And so this book also made me want to like, I've always been like the family historian, but look into my only family archives. I do have schizophrenia in my family and things like that. And there did mention in the book the fear of, you know, they were sick, will I be sick too? So I am writing more about this on my Substack, and I'm currently working on a piece about AI and how AI is modeled based on neural systems and things like that, and the overlap between that and how we view mental health. So if you want to read more, check that out. And thank you all. Thank you, Tia, and everyone. It's been great.
Thank you to Laurel. Y'all also just heard from Jay, Meredith, and now we have Tay. Oh, you're muted. Trying to get everyone's names.
Now my screen want to play because I'm trying to get it together. It's T.
T.
It's just the first 4 letters of my name. I'll just switch the screen up. Give me 1 second to share. Okay. Now it's slow. See, I have a photo that's saved, but for some reason, even though, let me just do this one more time. My bad.
Take your time.
Okay, save photo. Okay, now we're gonna go back to the beginning. Add. Okay. So everyone can see the photo. Everyone can see everything. Hello, hello. Like I said, coming into this has been a beautiful experience doing this with everyone. And a big part is Black Joy. Mixtape raised me. And I value what that experience has been because I've literally have been in community with so many incredible people, from listening to Black women speak. And so as I start this, I'm kind of going to go pretty fast because I want to make sure I get it in the 5 minutes. But I titled mine's Black Women Cosmic Destiny to Liberation. And writing a title like Black Women's Cosmic Destiny to Liberation feels so grand for what I'm going to be able to cover in 5 minutes. But I also, it's a requirement for that bomb that I needed to begin. And like others, the work of reminding myself that reading, journaling, and processing and to study is an ancient tool and it's a gift from the winds of change. And this study group is the manifestation of a deeper set of words, those words that's spoken through the unspoken need to just get free. And as I started studying Hawk, I started this journey in Guadalajara, Mexico, and the work came to me through a need to know. I just wanted to know the woman that said, we boarded a train, kiss all goodbye. And now my heart was a sympathetic sigh. And so that place is how I land today. Now I'm back in North Carolina, where I'm reading from Vivian Ayers Hawk. And so the section I'm reading from is migration. And this is the start of migration. I look to the sky and let the want of it flow through my being. And as I generated more and more one of it, sending the best formed images of my hopes flowing into it, sustaining the flow of desiring and holding my mind steady in the stream of vibration. Much of what I started with Hawk, because I stayed, like many people, stayed stuck in a section of my book. This is a time that I've remained here. And I remained here because Vivian is in this portion giving language to flight. And so I sat with that for weeks. And in my own migration pattern, I yearned to feel what she detailed about Hawk's journey into the unknown. And so when I get to page 21, it was a part that really just sat with me for such a long time. It said, all through the sky, there are winds that come to usher one onward, but then comes winds to jeopardize and blow you back again. No hawk's wings steadily forward. You can make the most of every energy that flows. achieving rise to relative sensations of exhilaration and ecstasy, but a poignant full and ambitious nod, ecstasy wanes, and only the pangs of an ecstasy can spawn the flight to ecstasy again. And so I kept circling back to that. And as I circle back to this idea of Black women's cosmic destiny and liberation, I look through those hawk's eyes and I see my own migration pattern. And I really see with this group, we've had our own migration pattern. And what comes out of that, a lot is just our birthright, is this ritual change. And we have been and we always will be initiated into it. So many before us have had this existential, like turbulent rise to being free. And it's just something that's a part of our cosmic destiny. And those pangs of the in ecstasy is just a doorway to those unknown tongues that are edified in our world, in our spirit, and in that journey onward and upward. And rather than, it's something that's rather through the spoken word, whether we do it through written word, whether it's the spirit of the word, whether it's a song without words, we will always find a way to migrate. And so as I sat with migration and as I sit with liberation, I thought about how as we kind of keep going through these iterations of ourselves, of whether it's past selves, whether it's Black women who came before, that's present, that will be in the future, we cannot help but to continuously liberate ourselves and to redefine and to reinvent and to find pathways to liberation that is not necessarily something that is just starting with us. It's something that is a story that is constantly being written. And so that was my time. Yes. Thank you so much. I'm going to post my stuff on my Substack. Thank you so much, everyone, for everything. And I just truly enjoyed studying with you all. Thank you.
This is getting so emotional. Next, we have Olivia.
All right, everybody, how y'all doing? Good morning, well, good afternoon, and maybe morning for the West Coast people. All right, I'm gonna get my screen set up. Okay, can y'all see that okay? Beautiful. Wait, I can't yet. Okay, okay, it's loaded from my end. Y'all can see it though, right?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, period.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia. I use she, her pronouns. For the past 6 weeks, I have been studying Hooke's Law, an album by Kia, and my presentation today is all about how we push back against liminal digital space in the age of disinformation. So a little bit about me that'll inform the way that I listen to the album, and what I took away from it is that I am an artist and a cultural commentator and a public health researcher based in Chicago, and I'm from Miami, Florida. So you'll see why I mentioned that in a couple of slides, but let's jump right into it. I don't know why I added all of these animations. They weren't there when I made this, but who is Kia? Let's start there. Kia is a jazz vocalist and instrumentalist. Hooks Law is her second album. She's a Leo, but I think that Kia is a stand-in for Black, queer, Gen Z femmes who are navigating the internet as a space to experiment with thought and build community. When I listen to this album, and every time I do, I think of it as the aftermath of listening to SZA's Control, right? If you are a 20 something who was listening to SZA's Control in your early 20s, you're now in your late 20s, you've probably gone through lots of ego deaths, lost all your friends, all the things that she prays against. And Hook's Law is kind of the response to that, in my opinion. So, in studying this album, there were a lot of questions that came up for me, some of which are on the screen, all of which are about our relationships to ourselves, our body, our society, the internet, as someone who uses the internet to do cultural commentary and education work, sex and relationship to sex and relationships. And all of these come up in the album and throughout the album. Kia, in the way that she uses music, is a master at tension and using what I describe as like digital sound to create tension, where sometimes she's using things that sound like technology, sound like they were created by a machine, versus her voice, her raw voice and raw instruments. And I think that that is a stand-in again for how Gen Z people, Gen Z queer women are using the internet, navigating both like a real IRL experience and their digital spaces. I think one of the most important questions, though, is one that Kia poses herself, and it comes from the lyrics to her song Stupid Prizes. Tell me how I'm supposed to thrive when all I've known is to survive, when all I've known is to rely on I, right? I think when we've heard it throughout today, there is this individual culture that we live in where, in an ideal sense, we would exist in a more communal nature. And that can be really difficult to break out of. Kia, throughout the album, goes on a journey to provide answers to that, some of which are listed here, all of which I think relate to the title Hooke's Law itself. I'm not a physicist in any way, but this is how I understand Hooke's Law, right? There are forces that are enacted on us, some of which include disinformation, femicide that we've talked about throughout our study group. And we exist in these spaces, pushing back, using all of these tools to push back as hard as we can. So I think, though, one of the most poignant answers to this question about how we survive comes through the sampling of Pat Parker's work, Let Me Come to You Naked. And I want to play that for y'all really quickly of how it shows up on the album.
Let me come to you old, come as a dying snail, come weak and lay beside you. Let me come to you angry, come shaking with hate, come calloused and lay beside you. Even more, let me come to you strong, come sure and free, come powerful and lay with you.
All right, so there is this idea that as long as I'm able to be who I am, I'm able to come to you naked or strong or whatever that sentiment is, we can exist together. And as I think about what to do next, with all of these questions and all of these themes came up, I'm left with a couple of assumptions. First is that time is not sequential, rather it's relational, right? Pat Parker is able to exist in this album as close as possible with Kia and the rest of us interacting with this work. And that's not something that you can get reflected on a timeline, right? The second is that the internet is a digital space. Anything can happen if you're working on the internet, and you see some of my notes here too. Anything can happen if you're working on the internet. And then sensuality too is a political strategy. Our connection to our bodies and the way we understand ourselves and other people's is a political strategy all in one. So what I would like to do from here, taking all of these assumptions and the themes that I took from this work, is apply some public health theory to this. How do I use social network analysis to evaluate the way that uh, people in our relationships online, the quality of our relationships online, and their ability to sustain us as we react to different forces? So I think this is my last slide. I'm going to be writing about this on Substack and making videos about this on TikTok. I already have a published post on Substack that kind of relays what I'm thinking about, how I want to go about this, and how what's to come. So definitely follow me. Thank y'all for this space.
Next, we have Camila.
Peace, y'all. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So, on May 16th, a week before this teach-in, a new moon in Taurus took place. Earlier last week, I set an intention for that lunar transit, and it unfolded in conjunction with the energy I've been cultivating for the last 7 or so years. This was Black queer femme mysticism in motion. This energetic culmination facilitated in a major crisis that actually resulted in me losing all of my research for what I've been studying, because I wrote my notes by hand. Pulling from memory is also Black queer femme mysticism, because often for Black people, Black femmes, Black queers, we are pushed out of spaces and our archives suffer for that.
We are the original data processors, those storing and compiling knowledge in our bodies for times like this when the choice is your physical belongings or your life. The project that I studied is an album called Black Encyclopedia of the Air by the artist Moor Mother. It begins with the track Temporal Control of Light Echoes, pulling us into a sonic landscape that immediately situates us within haunting. The lyrics, this place, repeat throughout the entire song. And as we hear her ruminate on space and place, we also hear her talking about carrying her own mother, your mother, their mother in her womb, because she understands herself as a vessel and a spatial center, not just an object that takes up space. She understands that her bodies, both physical and energetic, are sites for learning, growing, processing, and how, as the mother of civilization, which melanated femmes are, we have birthed not only the beauty and the genius that we see around us, but also the terror. And recognizing that there's an opportunity to engineer systems and codes for self-possession and evolution beyond the colonial binaries that we are often pushed into. On track 2, Mangrove, one of the artists, Elucid, says in verse 1, out of body, flesh of my flesh, spirit counter, time never pressed. And in verse 2, Moor Mother says, earth gasp for air, no touched memories. On track 5, Obsidian, we get narratives of Black life in inner cities. One line says, capitalistic lung, mama, can I breathe? Black Encyclopedia of the Air is concerned with the breath, which is to say that is concerned with the spirit. This is the part of us that cannot be taken captive, made to perform, or even named. Those of us operating as captive maternals, a term coined by the scholar and philosopher Joy James, must find refuge in the breath with the spirit through frameworks such as Black queer femme mysticism, which I mentioned earlier. James says that the captive maternal is a function, not an identity, that we are identified by our function in service, caretaking, sacrifice, and resistance to dishonor and disposability. I believe that taking up the mantle to study, to archive, to resist, to serve our people within the imperial core means that we function as captive maternals. As such, it is imperative that we understand ourselves as spatial vessels for the breath and spirit, which is where we find not only solace, but protection and alternative realities to operate through. And the song that made me revere this project years ago when I first heard it is called Made a Circle. We get perspectives about motherhood, life, lineage, and how connection is intrinsic, how we always return to each other. At the end of verse 2, we hear the enigma is a pattern passed down like matter, brings this gift to give that we matter. We know different from them. We make a difference after we witness their valor. Their spirit is ours. Black Encyclopedia of the Air underscores not just the way that we take up space, but the way that space has been designed around us and how vast we are in our existence, our capabilities, what we feel, and what all of that facilitates. So after loss, exile, and hardship, we ourselves, our spirits, are where we must find refuge. When we become fugitives, we must run to ourselves. If Black queer femme mysticism is the map, then Black Encyclopedia of the Air is a soundtrack and a tool for tempering the frequencies and vibrations, making them a vehicle to get us to the promised land that is ourselves. And that's all I have for you guys. Oh, and here's my info. Substack, Instagram, where I write about this stuff.
Fabulous. Thank you. Next, we have Azaria.
Thank you all. Greetings. Let me see if I can share screen. I hope you all can see that. So, hi everyone, my name is Azaria Cunningham, and today my title presentation is called Radical Refusals, Sacred Returns, Fugitive Feminism, Sankofa, and Ontological Repair. So when I first started out this journey, and I'm grateful just to be in this space because it really has breathed life back into me, not just as an academic, but as like a public scholar, community engaged scholar, and just reading not for like with things in like for product or production, but more so for like refusal and repair within my own life. So I read Emi Jula's Fugitive Feminism, and I'll read from starting off on page 31 to 32 just to explain how she defines fugitive feminism. So, fugitive feminism is both the promise and the act of self rebirthing into a different reality where we no longer are circumscribed by the assumptions of humanity that have shaped our liberation struggles, by turning our backs on the very thing for which we have struggled for generations: inclusion in womanhood and humanity. Using the tools to us from our Black feminist foremothers to rethink our existence, fugitive feminism is the potential of a future that is wide open. Being unmoored from humanity opens up possibilities of divesting from whiteness, violence, capitalists, accumulation, patriarchy, the gender binary, compulsory heterosexuality, ableism, and classism. What could we build by stepping away from the human together? The possibilities of fleeing humanity are productive and create a space for reinvention. I want to explore the process of becoming something else. I have no answers to what that else might be, but the road we walk to get there may produce it. It could look like joy, recuperation, mutual aid, all that is nearly unimaginable under racial capitalism, upheld by the politics of the human. So very similar to Tia's early presentation, right? I'm leaning more into what world building and what it means to live outside of the world built for us, but technically not by us and for us. So the word so I leaned into another article that I found like online, and it was called Sankofa as Praxis. So the ontological healing, memory, and decolonial return. And it was by Gabriel Oper. And in this work, I put both pieces together. So Emi Jula, my takeaways from this was Emi Jula was telling us what to leave behind. So the false promises of like Western humanism, while Oper tells us where to go. So like going back and retrieving so our ancestral memory and how we're making space to exist here. So true liberation requires like this dual movement. So we're fleeing from harmful Western categories, but then it's also still this consciousness to return to our ancestral memory for us to heal. So looking at this ontological healing, not just as a form of psychological and existential damage from colonialism, but connecting to our ancestors. So for me, it was more so talking to my mom about what my grandmother did while she lived, and how to exist in this world freely. Uh, and then in pairing this work, I also started to look at other books. So Rest as Resistance, so creating dream spaces. One of the tenets at the end of Hershey's work, and also leaning on to Fugitive Pedagogy by Givens, and then thinking about what work I want to leave behind myself as potentially an ancestor when I pass. So thinking about Black feminist writing by Stephanie Evans as a tool. So really I started thinking about to flee, but also to return. I knew that doing this work, I couldn't just think about like escape, um, like our current reality, which we're living in, but also thinking about what I want to build and leave behind, so that like that existence of legacy. So fugitivity, I just want to leave us with this. Fugitivity without Sankofa risk endless running without a home. So Sankofa without fugitivity is impossible because you cannot return while still trapped in colonial structures. So let's create our own blueprints for being and existing. And lastly,
Amazing. That's time.
yep, this is thank you. Thank you
Mm.
to Amber. Thank you to Tia. Thank you also to my fellow cohort members for welcoming me and creating space for me here. And if you want to connect, here is my IG and TikTok as well as my email. Thanks again.
Okay.
Melanie, is that?
Cool. I'm
And
sharing the screen. Can you see it?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. So hi everybody, I'm Melanie. I guess by training I'm an engineer, but I um, wanted to and still do want to write a book that is about fusing African diasporic religions with like science fiction, but also kind of set in the future. So that took me on a journey to trying to understand a bit about my own background. I have family from Trinidad and Haiti, but I'm not as in touch with the Haitian side. And I really kind of enjoy reading Haitian literature because it's like dark, but also like indicative of a very resilient people. And a lot of times it's not written by women. So I specifically searched for stories and accounts of people's experiences by Haitian women. And so I landed on this book called Nandomi, An Initiate's Journey into Haitian Voodoo by Mima Rose Beaubrun. And the image on the cover of the book is actually it's called a veve or a religious symbol, and this one stands for one named Ertsuli, who is a loi or a spirit of love, passion, and beauty. So I think she chose that specific one for the cover for that reason. And it kind of taps into a bit of what Camila said about sort of losing some of their work. The author's work actually initially got lost in a flood because she was an academic and she was going to write a whole dissertation about it. But then all of that got lost. And among other things, like being exiled from Haiti with a regime change because she's in a revolutionary music group. So there's a lot involved in why she decided to still push forward and write this book about voodoo. And so I am a person who I think more visually than written, but I'm working on translating what my brain sees as a picture into words. And so I actually made a little painting, if this wants to work. Let's see. Yes. So I made a little painting, and this was like where it started. And every time I read something, my goal was to add a little bit to it because a lot of the story was very hard to conceptualize if you don't have this background. And so this yellow square in the corner comes from well, first, it's supposed to be like a picture of a coast in Haiti. I did not pick a specific city, but the author spent a lot of time in a place called Wanamenta. And so she would describe a lot of her sort of lucid dreams with like a yellow saffron tinted hue. So I kind of put that block there and I wanted to figure out a scene around that block. And so some key meanings that kind of come up throughout. I haven't finished the book, but in the beginning. So Nandomi is this concept of a lucid state. So you're kind of dreaming, you're kind of awake, but it's described by a lot of mambos or priestesses as um, a second consciousness. So it just allows you to be in a different state of understanding things around you and changing your perception of what you see and feel. And then there's a Guinan, which is based off of Guinea, like the African country. And this kind of is it's a state and a place, but like kind of everything and nothing at once, to say it in one way. And in order to reach that state, you have to transform yourself and your understanding and physical perceptions of
life and existence in a sense. And like how other religions will have a god or gods that you um, maybe have identifiable by name or by certain motifs that represent them. There's also this sense of yin and yang, which no one knows. It's everywhere and also not there. But it's not a thing that you can physically touch, and you don't necessarily pray to this, but you know it's around you and influencing you and your actions and beliefs. There's a laku, which every voodoo ritual kind of happens around. And so it can be a physical space, but for example, the study hall could be described as a laku of its own. It's a community where people kind of gather around a shared experience or some aspect of life that you all believe in and practice. And then luas are all of the different spirits that help guide you. And each voodoo ceremony summons one specific one first as a way to be the in-between between our real, like, human world and the spirit world. And so I added a little bit as time went on. And so I added more houses on the right to kind of symbolize the laku that she's kind of going through her experiences in. And she has a lot of these experiences where she goes on a 21-day fast. And then because during that fast, she's only consuming the same meal every day without any physical possessions, her priestess now tells her that
That's
you've reached,
time.
oh no, okay. Well, I was going to call it the veil is finally torn away because if through her experiences, the Mambo finally tells her that now she's ready to begin because the veil of all of her thoughts and ideas and worldly possessions are finally being torn away so she can kind of just experience the ritual without having to derive some deeper meaning from it and live in the moment. So that is it for now. But I will finish it as I continue the book.
That I don't know how I have goosebumps. I don't even want to end it. Just I don't know if everybody can come on screen and just give yourselves a round of applause. Woo woo. Yeah, yeah. Let us see you if you feel comfortable being seen. Please. Wish I had a blowhorn or a bell. Bing, 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 bing.
Air horns.
Air horns. Look at your
Y'all
beautiful
did
faces.
that. We did that.
We certainly did. T, do you want to start? I'm just gonna close this. I feel like this was the altar and we have come to it, and this was the work.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to say thank you again and appreciations to everyone. Timing impeccable, the flow, all of that.
Impeccable.
And this has been just so juicy. And I love seeing everybody's journey. And I would sign up for this class in a heartbeat.
Legit. Also, one, thank you all to every participant who shared today. I just felt like I was immersed in like the best. This is if I went to a HBCU, this is what it would give. Um, Last week I shared online this week, and I'll do this really quickly because we've had you all morning. I read online this week that they are starting to, of course, dismantle Black studies. And with that, I say we got Black studies at home. We have always had to have Black studies at home, and we will continue to do this work as much as we continue to gather, to listen to our music, to archive, to journal, to learn, and be in community with each other. I thank each of you all so very much for committing to this practice for 6 weeks. Again, for those of you all who are watching, thank you for tuning in. Please, we're already, a big thing about this project was doing what I can to break down the access that we have and shift and mold the access that we have to social media platforms in order to make space for what we just tried to do. And that work will always continue. That is literally why I use the internet. Please subscribe and follow to these channels, Ample World on YouTube as well as Instagram, because it will be the signal that I use to share the collective syllabus that all of these voices have contributed to so that you can stay connected to their work, as well as take on any of the subjects that they gave you, planted a seed for. There's no perfect way for us to end this because it's not meant to end. So with that, I just thank you all again so much for your time, your energy, for saying yes, and what we all know, which was just awaken something that already existed inside of all of us, in hopes that it's a pathway and a blueprint to our next steps as this white supremacist world comes to another end, and we are there to continue the work that we've been doing. Thank you all again, and that's our time. We ended before noon. Wow. Bye, you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take
Bye,
care.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Be well. Take good care.
Bye, y'all.
Figure out how to end this. I'm like reading the last bit of the chat. Okay, I'm just ending it. Tia, is that cool?
Yep.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.